Okay, so I believe we are recording now. And so I'm going to call the meeting to order here at 4:33. And what I would like to have each of you do, if you don't mind, would be to turn on your cameras and then use the chat feature. Those of you who are members of the committee, please use your chat feature to type present, and that will be our way of establishing who was here. Great, thank you very much. All right, Tushar, I'm going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to you, and I will start sharing my screen.
Welcome everyone to our March meeting of the Curriculum and Instruction Advisory Meeting, and we'll get started with the slides in just a moment. All right, so we'll start off with oral communications. Do we have any public comments today?
Let's see if there's anyone in the audience who would like to make a public comment. If you can raise your hand now, that's how we would know you're there.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any right now. If it comes up later and anyone else joins, they can raise their hand.
Okay.
All right, and for the agenda, we're basically today going to be going over mostly a core novel update, and then after that, the climate literacy and educational network committee to kind of discuss some climate initiatives that the district is working on. And we'd also like to ask if there's any volunteers to take this month's minutes. And we can send you the template. It'll be pretty simple, just taking down some basic notes throughout the meeting. Yeah, Shilpa, was that? Did you raise your hand?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I'll take it. Just email me the template.
Okay.
You.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ms. Kelly, can you do that?
Yep, I sure can.
All right. Okay, thanks. And then in the meantime, we can probably vote on last meeting's minutes. So I think we emailed them earlier. If you've had the chance to look over them, you can suggest any amendments to them, or if not, if they look good, then can anyone motion to pass last meeting's minutes? Yeah, Trustee or Ms. Burke.
Thank you. I wasn't at the last meeting, so when I was looking at the minutes, I realized it has, there was a public comment, but there was no way of knowing what the public comment was about. So I just wondered if that could be added to the minutes.
Could we go back and add that later, or would we have to only approve the minutes after adding that back in?
We can approve the minutes knowing that we're going to make that change to them.
Okay, sounds good. Are there any other amendments? Okay, then can anyone make a motion to approve the minutes with the addition of that information detailing what the public comment was about? Yeah, Aniket?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Yeah, Shilpa, thank you. Okay, and then you can just type yes in the chat if you would like to approve those minutes. If you weren't here, or you can probably do abstain, or you can vote no. All right, looks like we have majority yeses, a couple abstentions.
Right, Shilpa, I'm having a hard time sharing this with you. Would you be willing to just open a document on your computer and just sort of keep running record, and then I'll be glad to put it into the template?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder for our committee norms, we've gone over this a couple of times, but just over Zoom to make sure your microphones are on mute, and also a reminder that these meetings are broadcast and recorded. Yeah, we've already approved last meeting's minutes. And yeah, do you want to take it now?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tushar. So I'm very excited to let you know that after literally a year of working on it, the Board of Trustees did approve our recommendation for the new core literature collection, and you can see the books here. We did recommend 2 books at each grade level. For 7th grade, we recommended Inside Out and Back Again and New Kid. So I'm reading kind of from the left to the right. 8th grade, I Am Malala and Real. 9th grade, Born a Crime and Romeo and Juliet. For 10th grade, we approved 1,000 Splendid Suns and then a choice of either Knight or Mouse. 11th grade, Everything I Never Told You and The Great Gatsby. And for 12th grade, 1984 and The Poet X. And we are really pleased with the diversity in this collection. We know that it does not cover every situation and every kind of person, but it really extends the diversity beyond where we were. We have also given each of the schools some one-time funding to allow them to purchase supplemental novels to kind of fill in where we know that there might be some gaps, and also to address the needs that are unique for their community. We tried to plan it so that they could purchase just about 1 new novel per student. So we were able to give them $15 a student, and the English departments are in the process of figuring out how they're going to spend that money right now. They're placing those orders. So this is just a tremendous success, and I think a great jump forward, and real compliment to Tushar and the Surfboard E, who nominated a number of books and who have really been our partners in this all along, as well as our English Curriculum Council, and of course the English teachers who worked fully for a year and in a very dedicated way, and then also a couple members of my staff, Nate Ivey and Dawn Nagaro, who were instrumental in making sure that all of this happened. So it's a great chapter to close, if you'll excuse the pun, and we're very, very excited about it. All right, our presentation this month is actually going to be from one of the instructional coaches who works for me. His name is Nate Ivey, and he's going to be joining us, I think, right at 4:45. He's actually coming out of another committee meeting and going to come across to this one in just a couple minutes. In the meantime, I don't know that there's anything that we need to necessarily be doing. Maybe we'll check one last time to see if there is anyone who wanted to make public comment. Is there anyone there in the audience who joined us with the goal of making public comment? If so, please raise your hands now, and we'd be glad to hear from you. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so that does close our required 10 minutes of public comment for today. Anyone who is on the meeting is, of course, welcome to stay and listen. But we are past our period of public comment. Stacy, go ahead.
Can I ask a clarifying question since we have a few minutes?
Sure.
So I know that the books are going to be the new core literature, and then you had said the additional money you're giving to the school is so that they can buy other supplemental books for students at those schools, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then the C&I department or district, they're going to be the ones making the order to purchase the core novels for all of these students.
Yes, that's being done through our purchasing department, paid for with district funds, and then those books will be delivered directly to the sites.
And do we know, is it looking, is the plan for one per every 7th grader, one per every 8th grader, or is it like a couple of class sets so that teachers could rotate?
We asked each of the schools how many copies of each book they'd like to have, because some schools like to have all the students at a grade level reading the same book at the same time, in which case they would need a full, set for all of their students. Other schools don't really want to say store that many books, and they're going to have students read them on a rolling basis anyway. And so everybody got to indicate how many books they, best fit in with how they're going to plan to teach the novels.
Thank you, Kim, for clarifying. Since I don't teach middle or high school, I was just curious because I'm just really excited that there's going to be some new books for our students starting next school year.
Yeah, thank you for asking the question, Stacy. Appreciate it.
Kim, do you get a list of the attendees or should I just note them down?
Yeah, great question. Because we're working in Google Meet, I do get a list of everybody who's signed on, so you don't need to worry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize for this delay. We moved quickly through our business. We could actually take some of our business from the end of the meeting and move it forward if you want. As you know, one of the decisions that we need to make at the end of each meeting is where we'd like to hold our next meeting. And our next meeting will be on the 26th of April. So it's going to be a little more than a month away from now, because a month from now we'll be on spring break. And we have the same choices that we always have, which would be to continue to meet online if you'd like, or we can go back to meeting here in the district office in person. We have relaxed some of the mask mandates, if that makes a difference to anybody, either wanting to come or not wanting to come. Masks are strongly recommended in the buildings, but they are no longer required. And so I don't know if anybody would be interested in having a quick conversation while we're waiting for Nate about where we might want to have our next meeting.
I like to have face to face. So if there's any chance of doing it in person, if things continue to be safe, I would like to consider that.
I agree.
Okay.
I also agree. I like in person better. I think we have better discussions, but I am open to the other side as well in trying to be respectful.
Okay. Well, I can see that Nate has joined us. Let's see if I can find him.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Nate. So let's hold making this final decision until the end of the meeting. And what I'm going to do now is introduce you. In fact, maybe what I'll do is stop sharing, so we can go back maybe to seeing everybody. And I'd like to introduce Nate Ivy. Nate is one of the instructional coaches here in the C&I department. His focus is history, social studies, and then kind of all of the above. Anything else we might ask him to take care of, he does well. Nate was one of the absolute masterminds of the core literature adoption. He and Don Nagaro thought through each meeting and really helped bring that committee along and helped us get to the success that we had with that. And so I want to just publicly thank Nate and Don for that. Nate's here in a different capacity right now. One of the other jobs that he is doing for us is that he is overseeing a climate literacy project. It was certainly something that we had been thinking about, and then it was moved forward a little bit by a resolution that the board made about a year ago. And Nate has been overseeing a committee that has some really super good ideas and some exciting plans for the future. And so he agreed to come on to our meeting today and share information about that. And so, Nate, I would be happy to show your slideshow if you'd like me to. And
yeah, that'd be really helpful if you don't mind, Kim. Yeah,
I'd be happy to do that.
It'd be one less thing I have to do on my screen as well, and you seem to have it mastered, so that'd be fantastic. Well, Kim pulls that up. Just a little bit more about me. I'm Nate Ivey. I'm an instructional coach. I've been in the role for a couple of years in the district. Early in my career in Fremont, I taught at Irvington High School. I taught American Studies, a combination of U.S. history and American Lit. But I was outside of the district on loan from the district to the Alameda County Office of Education for about 10 years, where I served as the regional lead for environmental education for the San Francisco Bay Area. So spent a considerable amount of the recent years of my life thinking about working on and advancing environmental education and climate programs. So I'm glad to be able to bring those resources and skills to the district. And I want to talk about what we're calling FUSD Clean, our climate literacy and environmental education network. So to do that, I want to give a little bit of background on some historical context. So next slide, Kim. So California and Fremont in general have just an incredible track record and history of advancing environmental and sustainability initiatives. When we look around Fremont, there are just so many excellent examples of individual schools, groups of students, district policies, resolutions to advance our environmental story and to advance sustainability. However, when I think people think of Fremont, they might not have at the front of their mind that Fremont is a place where all of this really good environmental work is happening. And I think that calls to mind two things. One is we probably need to do a better job talking about it. And two is that there's probably a considerable amount more that we need to do. So just thinking of California's long history, even before there was a UN resolution on environmental education, California passed a resolution that required that schools portray humanity as part of the ecological system and explain the necessity of protecting the environment to students. And that was all the way back in 1976. 1992, Fremont passed a recycling resolution and a waste reduction policy. I think one of the interesting things here is that when we think about sustainability, environmental education, climate literacy, it has both an aspect of what students are learning, what students are doing, and how our campuses operate. So they're all interwoven to some degree. A key piece of state legislation happened in 2003. California passed AB 1548, the Education and the Environment Initiative, which did a number of things. But one of the key things it did is it called for any time that there was a revision to any framework or standards in California that connections to the environment had to be considered. So an example they gave is that, in fourth grade, students would learn that the grizzly bear is on the flag of California, but in fourth grade, students weren't required to learn that the grizzly bear was extinct in California and why. So this EEI initiative called on CDE to always look for and be sure to include the environmental connections when applicable, and to make sure that every framework revision and every standards revision included environmental principles and concepts. Fast forward to 2016, and we start to see the California NGSS framework come out and the California History Social Science framework come out. So these revisions included environmental principles in them. So prior to 2016, if you were doing environmental stuff in the science class, you were probably getting away with something because it wasn't required to include the environment in the prior generation of standards. After 2016, if you're teaching science in California without including the environment, you're doing it wrong. So, it went to, you were kind of getting away with something if you were including it, to now you can't really do the job effectively if you aren't including environmental storylines, environmental principles, environmental concepts. So as new books are coming out, new textbooks are getting adopted, as teachers are learning about the frameworks, they're learning about and learning to incorporate that in their individual disciplines, which is a great step, but maybe not a sufficient one if a district doesn't think about how all of those discrete individual experiences and lessons and all of these different content areas add up to something really meaningful. So in 2021, in the spring of 2021, students organized and presented a resolution to the board for the educational response to the climate emergency. It followed on a 2019 resolution that they passed, which was a resolution that they got the board to make a promise to commitment on climate change action. So thinking about how our facilities operate, how we source energy, how we manage resources, kind of on the operations side. That was 2019. In 2021, they brought it back and said, we also really need to make sure that we're paying attention to this on the curriculum side. So next slide, Kim. The resolution does a number of things, but I think these are important to call out for this committee. Students said it's time to define what it means to educate students for a future with human-induced climate change. They want that. They're asking for that. They want to make sure that their education includes this. They call on the district, and the resolution that the trustees passed commits to graduating students who are well-versed in climate change and climate solutions. And specifically, the resolution asks for the district to create an implementation plan, the goal of which is to detail the progressive development of the climate literacy program by grade level and assess its results. So building on that, we heard this resolution, and I think also we're really mindful of some of the challenges that resolutions often face. I think resolutions often get passed and people pat themselves on the back and say, great, we passed the resolution. But I think passing the resolution is the first step to the actual real work. So we've passed that resolution. Now we need to do these things. The achievement wasn't getting the resolution passed. The achievement is going to be in getting this work done. So next slide, Kim. So in curriculum and instruction, we took that resolution as direction to start putting together a group to figure out a plan, at least on the curriculum and instruction side. So we formed a group that we called the CLEAN Committee, the Climate Literacy and Environmental Education Network Committee. Included 3 teachers from each grade band, 3 K5, 3 6-8, 3 9-12, and 5 students, 1 student from each of the comprehensive high schools. They were recruited and nominated through the Surfboard E group, and their participation has been really important for this effort. And the task of the CLEAN Committee had a couple of parts. The first part was to create a vision for climate literacy and environmental education. So the resolution says we want all students to be climate literate. Well, what do we mean by that? What are our hopes and dreams? What do we want our student experience to be like? And then once we have a vision for what we're trying to achieve, to draft an implementation plan. So I'm here today to give an update on where we're at with that process, and then to also get some input from you on some key questions we have. Next slide, Kim. And I should also mention, throw into the chat if you have questions, or just, interrupt if something comes up, but there will be some time for discussion in this. as we dove into this work, the place that our group started with was with really exploring our values and what was important to us as committee members. How we would know if we were on the right track or if we were going in the wrong direction. So our values from the very beginning were that this effort needs to be action oriented, that it's the opinion of this group that the time for awareness is past. We're not trying to raise awareness about environmental concerns and challenges anymore. We really need to move into a really focused action-oriented phase. That this work needs to be equitable. We have a lot of questions about who already has opportunities to participate in environmental education and climate literacy in the district. We know that some students go to science camp, other students don't. We know that some schools have school gardens, other campuses don't. What is the pattern of that? Are there reasons behind it? And even if students are having different experiences, are they having an equitable experience with environmental ed or climate literacy or not? So it's a value that's really important to this group, is that this needs to be equitable. We need this effort to be integrated. I think people have a general opinion that this topic falls within science. And to some degree, that's true. Science helps us understand these problems, but if we're really going to solve them, we're going to need all disciplines. Just at the basic level, if we're going to solve climate challenges and environmental challenges, we need economics, we need policy, we need history, we need psychology, we need sociology, we need to know how people work and make decisions, and all of that falls within the social sciences. If we're going to, help people understand what's going on and have dreams of a better future, we need to engage the arts and the language arts. It needs to be integrated across disciplines. It needs to be age appropriate. We know that the students passed a climate education resolution, a climate literacy resolution. We felt that this needed to be broader and include environmental education with opportunities to connect with nature that are age appropriate for students at all grades. All kids need chances to connect with and love nature, and that we need to be really mindful about bringing adult concerns and fears about the climate emergency onto our youngest kids. It's simply not appropriate to scare kindergartners about the death of the planet before they've had a chance to fall in love with nature, and until we've also helped equip them with skills to do something about it. So there's some age appropriate handoff about when we start really diving into the challenges. And we think that's a really important value to follow. And then finally, we need to be culturally proficient. Fremont is a very diverse district. Different communities have different connections with nature, different ideas about environmental priorities, and different experiences with environmental harm and hazard. And we need to be really mindful of that as we navigate any programs or any choices we make. So next slide, Kim. After we decided what our values were, our group brainstormed about 150 ideas of a beautiful future. So we asked them, what are your hopes and dreams for climate literacy and environmental education in Fremont? When you dream of the beautiful future, what do you dream? So we broke into small teams, brainstormed them all out, and got 150, 200 ideas. They were all over the place. And we grouped them into, we cut them up onto pieces of paper, grouped them into ideas that clustered together, which helped us develop some language around vision. And I do want to read it to you. So we as a group came to consensus that this is our final version of the vision. We adopted this on February 22nd. So we envision a future where environmental leadership and action is a shared responsibility within FUSD, and the district is known for holding environmental sustainability as a core value. We wanted to be really clear that it wasn't just on teachers, that it wasn't just on students, that it wasn't just on custodians, that everybody has a role to play in this leadership. And in fact, our committee was looking for some leadership and guidance from the highest levels of the district to get a sense of support in which directions we should take. Second part of this is that all students and staff attend well-maintained campuses that minimize climate impacts and foster deep connections with the natural environment. So this is where we think about facilities and operations. This is where we think about cafeteria systems, but also our buildings and grounds and opportunities for students to have nearby connections with nature. There's definitely a challenge in students thinking that nature is Yosemite if they don't also know that nature is their schoolyard, their community, their front porch. So we wanted to make sure that the campuses help foster that connection. Third part is that equity-focused partnerships help Fremont implement and maintain high-quality sustainability initiatives and educational programs. We have a really strong connection and history of relationship with Stop Waste, the City of Fremont, the Mass Science Nucleus, LEAF, and other partners, and we depend on them. We would like to add a lens of equity to make sure that those partnerships are equitably distributed, and that partners aren't just helping us launch something and then leaving. We need to launch and maintain. This fourth part is probably the part that falls most squarely within curriculum and instruction, which is thinking about the student experience both through the curriculum and through their on-campus experience with student clubs. And so here we envision a future where age-appropriate and culturally proficient K-12 climate literacy and environmental education in the sciences and humanities inform, educate, and empower all FUSD students to be civically engaged, action-oriented, environmental problem solvers. So you can see a lot of the values coming across in here, action orientation and cultural proficiency among them. And then finally, the committee was really strong on this, and they were absolutely right, is that FUSD students, staff, and school sites are celebrated for their green achievements while best practices are regularly shared across the district. We know there are some really fantastic stories, and those stories need to be shared to inspire others, but also to celebrate the efforts of people who've made those steps. And that there are best practices, and we just need to develop those communication channels for sharing them across the district. So let me pause just for a second at this point if there are any questions. Yeah, Michelle Burke, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. This is really exciting. And I wondered, when I see the part about partnerships within the community, and I wondered if there was a way to bring some of those partners onto your clean committee because they might have an interesting perspective to add to that work.
Yes, absolutely. That is a great point. And we've already started sharing this vision with Stop Waste and with the City of Fremont, who've had a chance to kind of look in it, see how they think about it, how they would engage with that. And in a moment, I'll show some of our action steps where I think where that'll be a little more visible. One thing on that idea of partnerships that we also name in our kind of conversations within the group is that there's two levels of partnerships between the district and our external partners, but we also need to do a much better job within the district of having job alike and peer alike support across sites, and also partnerships between teachers and custodians, between custodians and students. We just need to do a better job of building that internal resiliency as well. Thanks for the question. Any other questions at this point? Yeah, Shilpa. You're muted, Shilpa.
Sorry, I always forget. So I remember when my kids were younger in Bible, we tried doing something similar in the school. But I was just curious, like, did the group discuss something? Since you had high schools from students from each school, was there a discussion on taking it on like zone wise? Because that would bring in your cultural proficiency and then sort of narrow down the workload. I mean, it would divide it across schools and stuff. So was that a discussion?
That discussion has somewhat started. So, now that we've got our values and our vision in place, now we're really starting to think about our plan and how we achieve that. So maybe let me talk through the plan a little bit, and then that might give some ideas of where that might fit in. And also then I've got some specific questions that I'd love to get this committee's input on.
Sure.
So next slide, Kim. So as we go from a vision, we need to, we've started to think about how are we going to achieve this? So we've come up with a theory of action that has kind of an organizing idea that connects to each element of the vision. And the theory of action reads like this. If we, and that's just a giant collective we right now, it's not super well defined, but we being the district, we specifically being the CLEAN network, if we provide leadership and support, if we practice stewardship and connect to nature, if we build relationships, if we empower students, and if we share our story, our vision will thrive and we can achieve our environmental and educational goals. So it helps us organize and think about where different ideas for what we might do might fit. So this idea of zones might fit in the category of empowering students, or it might fit in the category of building relationships. And it helps us kind of organize and think about how we can move this forward and who might be responsible for the different pieces. So to kind of give a little more clarity on how that looks, let's take a look at the next slide, where we've got this theory of action organized into pillars that list, the idea, what we're trying to do, who might be responsible for that, and just a first pass brainstorm of some functions that those groups might provide. So this is a draft. Our CLEAN committee took a look at it for the first time today. So they had their first chance of kind of looking at this structure. So we still have quite a bit of revisions to do. But, for example, if we look at the empower students, which includes both their classroom experience and their, student club and student life experience, who might be responsible for thinking about that? It might be program managers for math and science and history, language arts, might be instructional coaches. It'll certainly be teachers. It'll be student leaders who have ideas and are leading clubs. It'll be site principals who are, helping to advance this work. And things that would need to happen in this category is we really need to come up with a scope and sequence. What happens in kindergarten? What happens in first grade? What happens in second grade? What are the curricular resources that support that? What action projects belong to different grades? What environmental experiences belong to different grades? Are there field trips that belong to different grades? What teacher training needs to happen? And how can student clubs be supported kind of more broadly across the district on this particular topic? So each of these pillars operates in a similar way. We just got out of a meeting with Laura Forrest, who's the district's public information officer, helping us think about this last pillar of sharing the story. An idea of including a standing item about the environmental successes or the environmental learning in the district through the district's newsletter or social media, maybe coming up with an awards or recognition campaign, and then, making sure that there's kind of uniform signage on campus. A couple of years ago, there was money to do energy efficiency upgrades at schools, and most schools changed the ballasts in the fluorescent lights or put in LEDs. So there was an incredibly robust energy saving initiative that happened, but there was no signage like explaining that to the world or to the community. So it was a little bit of a missed opportunity that we did all of this effort to upgrade facility, but then there was not even much of an effort to help the community or the students see the results of that effort, or even to know that they happened in some cases. Okay, so at this point, we have some questions for you. So Kim, maybe we can stop sharing this screen. And hopefully, Kim, you have the link to the document to share for feedback. And if you could put that in the chat and then maybe also share it on the screen, that would be helpful. While Kim's pulling that up, I do want to just point out that Sue Lemke is also on this group. She's been a regular member of CLEAN. She often has to leave at the last 15 minutes of our meetings to come and join you guys. But Sue, is there anything that you would like to share as Kim gets that in the chat and people try to open up the document?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a aha at the end of our meeting today as we were sharing ideas to go to the newsletter, the April 8th newsletter. I had mentioned at the beginning that when I got my teaching credential in 91, we were starting this environmental work through the credential program, and I feel like as a teacher in a silo that I was still in the exact same place. But Clean bringing out these things together is a way to connect us when we're in our silos, to know what's happening at different schools and to learn from each other. And another teacher on Clean mentioned that being in this group is helping him feel some accountability to do the work, hearing what other people are doing. And so I really applaud the district for and the students for getting that resolution, those 2 resolutions passed, and Nate for spearheading this work.
Great, thanks, Sue. Yeah, so our Clean meetings are at the exact same time as this meeting. There's a little bit of overlap, so I'm really glad I was able to join you guys today to share some updates. All right, so Kim has put in the chat a document, and Kim, maybe if you can show that on your screen as well, so I can talk through it. But we'd like to give some quiet, reflective time to gather your input on a handful of key questions. We're anticipating that as Clean moves from working on the vision to working on the plan, we need to really think about and gather input about what's most important to the community. So we have 4 key questions and then kind of an additional question at the bottom. But I'd like to give you guys a handful of minutes to quietly write and think, and then we'll discuss them. You should all have editing rights to the document. You can just pick a bullet point anywhere and start typing. But what environmental education experiences do you think are most important for students to have in Fremont Unified School District? Think of environmental education experiences that you had that were really important to your development, things that you've seen your children participate in, things you've heard about or that you're aware of. What are those key environmental learnings, those environmental lessons, those activities, those opportunities that are really important? Is the experience being in a garden? Is it going on a field trip? Is it classroom presentations? What are those experiences? The second one to the right is, at what age is it appropriate for students to learn about the climate emergency? The climate emergency has a lot of doom and gloom. It has a lot of things that are really terrifying and that frankly aren't appropriate for the youngest students to have to confront. So, at what age do students really start to learn, not necessarily about how climate works, but about the climate emergency and the problems we're confronted with? What types of action projects would you like to see students take at school, at home, and in the community? What actions are appropriate for students at different ages? What are you interested in seeing? Or maybe are there things that you don't think are appropriate for students to take action on? How might we mobilize the community members to participate in supporting this? And then also kind of the flip side of this is, what barriers do you anticipate? You all have a lot of experience, a lot of reach, a lot of connections. You've been around the track a couple times. What hurdles do you see coming as we try to work on something like this? And then finally, down at the very bottom, is there any other feedback you'd like to provide on the Clean Vision? So, I've kind of presented our values, our vision, our theory of action. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? So I'll be quiet for some amount of time. Kim, how much time can we allocate to them kind of thinking through this?
Nate, we're in really good shape on time. I think we could do as much as 10 minutes if you'd like to.
Okay.
That would still leave us a half an hour to talk it over and wrap up.
Okay, great. So let me give you 10 minutes to you've got the link to the deck. You can go back and look at that. You can, add into this document. So I'm going to be quiet until, we'll go till 5:25. So that's actually 8 minutes. And then we'll come back and discuss. Okay, it's 5:25. I see a couple people are still typing a comment, so I'll give a second for folks to wrap up their thought. And obviously, feel free if something else occurs to you to add it in as we talk through some of these ideas. The place I'd like to start is, not necessarily specific to any one of these questions, but maybe we could just start with a little bit of a open conversation. Your first reactions, like, you're hearing about clean for the first time. This is the first time you've seen the vision and this plan and the values. What stands out to you, or how are you feeling about this effort right now? So just in general, how are you feeling about this effort? And Kim, I don't know you guys' tradition for how you take turns on Zoom or on Meet, if people just jump in or if there's a hand raising tradition. But yeah, just anybody want to jump in with their thoughts on their general reaction to this? Yeah, Lisa.
I'm actually very excited about it. My just for really quick background on my family's experience, I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and during this COVID shutdown, they were doing ABC Mouse, and the ABC Mouse had this learning episode of coral reefs, and they learned that the coral reefs are dying out because of the tremendous amount of trash that is landing in our waters. And so it explained all that. And then that same week, we happened to go to the landfill to drop off some garbage. And my daughter, Arabella, made the connection that this is what's damaging our coral reefs. And she just went into a crying episode saying, "Mom, this is our landfill?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, this is not good for our environment." I said, "No." And so I said, "If you want to do something about it, why don't you do your own YouTube channel and try to find a way to help out? So let's make a brochure or something to educate families at home, because it all starts at home." So now that you guys are bringing this up, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This is great, because the kids do care about their environment. And when they make those connections on their own, it's so beautiful to see that love and compassion that they have for Mother Nature, So I think this is a great program, and I can't wait to see the results of this. And I would love to have like some kind of a brochure system that the children can take home, where they can do homegrown gardens, learn how to minimize trash using like metal water bottles or utensils instead of plastics. That would be a great thing to send home. And then at school, they just elaborate on those things, and having also have you heard of aquatonics or aquaponic? It's a new way of growing plants inside of a freight container, right?
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly that's supposed to be better for the environment. It'd be nice to have something like that set up at the school system, so that they can do at school, and then at home have the actual dirt garden so that they can learn about the differences. And I think that would really connect them. So I'm really excited about this program. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those comments, Lisa. You highlight a lot in there, how excited students are, how much they appreciate the connection to nature, but also the importance of being really mindful of the social, emotional connections to this. On some times that social emotional connection is rewarding, fulfilling, and joyful. And sometimes the social emotional connection is, having to confront, challenge, difficult emotions, anger, fear about that. So lots of really good feedback. Thank you for that. So continuing on, just kind of general reactions to clean, the vision, the values. Shilpa, I see your hand is up, and we will spend some time talking kind of about the different quadrants in particular, but just, general reactions at this point. Shilpa?
Yeah, my honest first reaction, I mean, I love the program, but my honest first reaction was change at Irvington, because that's a part of this is a lot what the students do. So I'm really excited that this is coming down to like elementary level and middle school level also. Thank
You know,
you.
and change is just such a great example of, I think what is emblematic in Fremont is that there are so many pockets of excellence. You know, not just Irvington's change. You know, American has an incredible science and eco club. Ardenwood has an incredible, you know, stop waste leader recycling and compost program. So like, there's these great examples all over the place. But I think, you know, if we could be really mindful about the types of experiences that really belong to different grades, you know, and highlighting the ninth grade change project where students have the skills, the capacity, the maturity, the, you know, some of the resources and freedom to pick a topic that's close to their hearts and take action on it. You know, it's a great project, and it'd be interesting to see how we map out the types of experiences we want all kids in the district to have. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Other just kind of general reactions to the vision, the values, and the kind of the theory of action.
This is Michelle. I agree, it's exciting. I also felt a little overwhelmed as we were typing. I was like, oh my gosh, yes and yes and yes. But then, oh, how do we implement it all? Because it all is so, it feels so urgent and we need to do it tomorrow. And so that's when you brought up the social emotional piece and being careful about how young and the kind, I believe as young as possible, and at the same time being careful about what that message is when you're a TK versus when you're in ninth grade, and making sure that we do an effective spiraling up of the, you know, that they're building up on the concepts that they've learned early on. I also have a cynical reaction in that in some cases, you know, we have so many high expectations of our students that if we, you know, if it's not required, it isn't necessarily going to get done. There's always going to be a core group of people who have the passion and commitment and want to do it, but this needs to be more widespread. And so sometimes you think about, you know, service requirements for the high schools, and kids do it because they have to do it. They have to check off that box, but we want it to be more internalized, and this is going to be a lifelong habit or skill or mentality that we want our kids to have, not just to check off the box and graduate.
Thank you for that. That is definitely something that our committee has struggled with, on how overwhelming the task feels, how urgent it feels, how much work there is to do. And when we start listing it out, it almost feels like kind of a tidal wave of responsibility that's already added onto, you know, an incredibly difficult time in education. That being said, one of the things that we've talked about is the idea of collective impact, that if we can really clearly say where we're going, each person can kind of think about where they are and figure out what their next step is in that direction. You know, and some people are in a position to take a bigger step than others. But if we're kind of coherently pulling in the same direction, it'll add up maybe in a way that kind of these disparate individual or kind of, you know, unique site-based programs haven't been able to add up before, because we haven't, you know, been as deliberate as we might about sharing resources or celebrating success or trying to name the types of experiences we hope to foster. So yeah, it's definitely a confounding of like, oh my gosh, it's so much, but is it enough? All at the same time. Thank you for that. Any other last comments? Maybe if anyone else has just a general reaction before we kind of dive into some of the specific feedback you guys provided. Yeah, Aniket. Oh, has left the meeting. That wasn't a raised hand. Sorry. Okay. I'm hoping that maybe we could start in the question of age appropriate. I was a little bit surprised to see TKK as young as possible on when we should start having students learn about the climate emergency. A lot of the research shows that if the climate message to the youngest children is scary, that the natural defense is to disengage from that and to put emotional distance between yourself and that topic. So, I see a lot of comments that, really young students should be learning about this. And I'm hoping that I can hear your thoughts on what does that mean? Images of polar bears stranded on ice floes are, they hurt the kids' hearts. Coral reefs bleaching, just they give all of us a sick feeling. And if you're, really young and really small, those sick and overwhelming feelings can feel kind of helpless and really scary. So, as you guys were putting in that, you're hoping that students as young as possible are learning about the climate emergency. Maybe can you talk through a little bit about what you mean or what kind of ideas you have about what that looks like for the youngest students? So, Megan, I see your hand is up.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify why I put that. I think that we can start to teach our youngest students without it being a scary situation. We can teach them that earthworms help make our soil healthier. We can teach them how to start sorting trash into blue, green, gray bins, that kind of thing. So my intention was not so much the urgency of the emergency, so much that there's actions everyone can be taking.
Thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate that. Shilpa.
On the same line, I wasn't thinking of the negatives. I was just thinking of some of the, just ways that they can help. Even something as simple as, turning off the light when you go from one room to another, or, just basics like even how to save it. And like Megan said, just sorting the trash or maybe using water bottles versus plastic, things like that, not necessarily the negative impacts.
Okay, thanks. Michelle.
I agree, and I was actually, when I was typing it in and saying never too early, I was ignoring the emergency part of that sentence of the question, because it's never too early to teach about the importance of the environment. And I think we'd be kidding ourselves to think that kids aren't already seeing polar bears stranded if they're watching, even National Geographic Kids. And what I'm hoping is that our education in FUSD is giving them the information around those images that they're probably already exposed to through media, whether it's on or YouTube or whatever it is that they're watching. So I think that we have the opportunity to really give the frame of reference of what this is about, but do it in a very positive way, that even though it feels overwhelming, if everybody did one small thing, then that can add up to a whole bigger thing for our planet.
Thanks, Michelle. Stacy.
Kind of piggybacking off what everybody else is saying. As some of you know, I'm also piloting part of this new science curriculum that we're hoping to adopt. And my students actually ended up on a tangent because we watched one of the science connections and about protecting the water sources. And they saw all this trash wash up on the beach. And so we just talked about how we shouldn't be leaving things laying around. We need to be more responsible. So that's kind of why I was putting it's never too early to start teaching it. And I guess like everybody else, I kind of ignored the emergency word to it.
Okay, great. Thank you all for those clarifications. What I'm hearing is that, for the youngest students, learning about climate resilience actions and behaviors is really important, or learning about the way that the world works when it's working well is really important. To Michelle's point, not ignoring things that come up, and having some of those answers ready. And so kind of continuing, like thinking about the climate emergency in particular, the message that I think adults are internalizing is that the climate is in crisis. If we don't figure it out, we're going to have mass extinction, mass death, incredible lack of resources, persistent droughts, starvation, climate conflicts. The climate emergency conversation does get kind of scary. So thinking about those more scary parts that do become important to learn about, and they show up in the NGSS, when we start thinking about, chemistry in their system, which would be high school kids, they do learn about ocean acidification, climate change, and, some of the bigger problems. It's been a while since I've had little kids in my house. Like, where is the maturity level on kids where they can really start to hear about and understand and tackle and navigate some of the scarier stuff? And two reasons for this question. One is, I think our group wants to give some really clear guidance to teachers about how to have these conversations with students. And we want to be really mindful of adults bringing their adult fears and understanding into the space of really young kids. So I appreciate your guidance on climate resilience, climate behaviors, climate action for young students. But where is this maturity age for students? Like, when is it like developmentally appropriate to tackle some of this harder stuff? And just, gut reactions to that. Yeah, Shilpa, thank you.
Sorry, I keep raising my hand.
No, I really appreciate it. I depend on people giving the feedback. So yeah.
So for me, I think kindergartners these days, based on my kids are older, but the few friends that I have who have little ones, I think they are pretty knowledgeable and are aware. They may not know the big words that we do, but they are aware that, I cannot, like, for example, I was talking to she's actually in a kindergarten in Weibel, and I was just talking to her, and then their water heater broke, and she was just saying that I can't take a shower. And then I said, well, how long do you take? She said, no, only 2 minutes. I can't waste water. So I guess it depends on how it's presented. They don't need the big words, they don't need the scary pictures. But I think explaining to them with pictures of stories that they already know, how, this part of the world was an ocean and then they dried out, and then we are, those kind of stories, they will understand it. But yes, if we show them, big scary pictures of animals being hurt or coral reefs, then yes, it does leave a different kind of an impact. So I think it just comes down to how it's presented and staying away from the grown-up language.
Thanks, Shilpa. Sue.
I just love what Megan Barrington said about teaching the kids about earthworms and composting, and coming at it from more of building connections among the young kids, and getting that appreciation, that connection to nature. And then I don't know what the sweet spot is where you start to really introduce the fact that we're destroying the planet. We're in the middle of a mass extinction for, those sort
terrible.
of things. We're out of water and wildfires and all that. I think that's later, but I think we have an opportunity to build the connection with kids and really highlight how we can get kids involved. That would be my preference right from the get-go.
Great. Thanks, Sue. Debbie.
Hi. Yes, I'm actually on the same notes as the lady earlier. I have a kindergarten myself, and I volunteer at school teaching music. And I feel like it's actually not too, they're not too young. I think it all depends on how you introduce the concept. The visuals that you use, it can be in clip art, cartoon image rather than realistic nature image. And also the wording can also be, be done for more kindergartners. For example, like you guys all have heard like going on a bear hunt, right? The song. It can be taught in a very scary way, or it can also be taught in a very fun way. It just depends on how it's been delivered and the material that it's used to deliver the message. So that was just my feedback.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all so much for kind of talking that through. I really appreciate hearing that. And it gives us some sense of how to navigate this question of age appropriateness. It's one of our core values, is that we want this to be age appropriate for students. And I think what I'm hearing is it's really important that kids start developing power and connection as early as possible, hopefully so that then they have a foundation for when things get tricky. I don't know, Kim, is that you, curriculum meeting host? Is that you?
That is me. So I'm wondering if the answer is we should always be presenting the realities in a way that whatever age of students we're presenting them to don't feel so overwhelmed that they move into despair or into like, I'm powerless to fix this. That even as adults, if I feel like there are things I can do, I'm much more inclined to do them than if I just feel like, it's hopeless. And so maybe the reason we're having such a hard time coming to the age, well, it's this age or it's this age or it's this age, maybe that's because the message we're kind of going around and around is the information we can present to each age of students becomes more and more sophisticated, but it always needs to be presented sort of factually and from the perspective of, and we need to find an answer for this, as opposed to it's over. I don't know, just a thought.
Thank you for that, Kim. I appreciate that. And, in prior work, I had heard from high school students the danger of informed apathy. Like the more they learned about it, the more they felt like, they're throwing their hands up because so much of what they were hearing was individual action instead of kind of collective response. But anyway, thank you. We need to think about that for all ages and all students. Michelle.
This may have been said. Our kids are incredibly astute, and I'm always impressed and amazed at even our youngest students, the insight that they have into what's going on in the world. And it was certainly much more, they're much more informed and aware than I ever was as a kindergartner or, even a high schooler. And again, I think that they're just exposed to so much more and everything's coming at them 24/7. And how it's filtered varies from home to home. So I can't stress the importance of them getting that frame within the context of the school with parents as partners. I think that's incredibly important. But I agree with everybody. I don't think there's not an age where it's too young to start exposing children to the importance without the despair part of it. And if it's that collective, we're in this together and we can solve this together, then I hope you have less likelihood of that despair. But I'm sorry, I'm not digressing, but when I think about some of even the Pixar movies that kids watch all the time, right? There are climate emergency information embedded in a lot of the current Pixar movies. So they are exposed to it in a cutesy way, but they need the reality of it as well. So.
Great. Thank you all. I think this feedback's been really important, and it's definitely something that our clean group can think about as we start trying to figure out the plan and who's going to do what when. I appreciate you've all left really detailed notes, and just kind of at a glance, I get the gist of all of them. There is one that I do want to just spend a little bit of time, maybe the next couple of minutes talking through. And it's the idea of being outdoors. For our group, the idea of outdoor education, connection to the outdoors, connection to nature is incredibly important. So there's a comment here, what environmental educational experiences are most important for students? And the comment is being outdoors, field trips to the park, or even around their own neighborhood, or maybe on their campus. And I'd like to just explore that a little bit because, I think the idea of kids having their classroom outside might not look like school to members of the community. So I'm just wondering, how do we navigate that so that outdoor learning is communicated well and viewed as important? And what kinds of things might kids be doing as they're outside? And then two, I think teachers don't have a lot of experience with teaching or taking students outside? And what kind of support do you imagine teachers would need to feel more comfortable or confident in having a class outside? Yeah, Debbie.
Oh, hi. I think that's my comments, my feedback there. Sorry.
No, I
Um,
appreciate it. I love this comment, but I just know that it can be a really difficult one
yeah.
because it confronts people's idea about what school is, what kids do, what's important, what's not important, what does learning look like, what should it look like. So I just wanted to have us talk it through a little bit to make sure that
Sure.
yeah.
So I entered that because, it's interesting. My son's kindergarten, I think a couple months ago, they actually did a walk around the neighborhood. It's a little field trip in Glenmore that they did. And they literally took the kids and they walked out and they went and put like letters in the neighborhood mailbox. We still have one of those old mailboxes in the neighborhood. So they passed some houses and the parents could chaperone, of course, with the mask on. And, you kind of walk by certain people, like some neighborhood, you get to see their landscaping. And now there are a lot of drought tolerant landscaping. So my son was able to learn a lot about cactus, succulents. And we talk about, there are certain plants that don't need as much water. So they did an outing like that. And it really made an impression on him as well. And of course, he had fun. Like, I think they even had escort for like the police officers, like helping them, cross the street. And then I remember when my son was younger, we did this program called Kindergarten, where the classes were taught outdoors. And we did one by the Dumbarton Bridge. And it was like the best time. We look forward to it every week and we explore the nature. And I just think that's a wonderful program.
Great. I happen to agree. I think it is really important to get kids outside. And I'm just, how do we help teachers feel more comfortable and how do we help parents understand that good learning is also happening outdoors? And it sounds like you really understand that. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this question of getting kids outside or supporting teachers? Yeah, Shilpa.
I love the idea. Growing up in India, the concept of Gurukul, which basically means an outdoor school, I'm very familiar with it. My middle school was part outside, so I'm absolutely for the idea. It's interesting because just about 2 months ago, I was talking to a friend and we just said, well, is there anything like that in the Bay Area? And I started Googling it and I came across this website called the Berkeley Forest School. And it seems like it's outside. I haven't gone to Berkeley or checked it out with them or visited or anything, but their website seems exactly what the conversation was about. So just throwing it out there in case you want to dig into it or look it up or something.
Can you spell that type of school or tradition?
Gurukul. I'll put a link out there. I'll put it in the chat.
Fantastic. Yeah. And, when we think about cultural proficiency in the district too, like tapping into these traditions and things that families would be familiar with would be really important. So I really appreciate that.
I know someone who actually runs something like this in India. She calls it unschooling because it's an outdoor school and you're not studying the traditional way, but you're still studying. So she calls it unschooling. I'll put the link in the chat and take a look and see. And if you if you reach out to her, she's a wonderful person. She'll respond.
Great, thanks. And we're going to take our last comment from Arathi. And I probably pronounced it wrong, so please correct my pronunciation.
That's correct. Hi. So I was just thinking about when we talked about the field trips. So my fifth grader had something called science camp, and then this year she was telling me that they had somebody from this school called the Web of Life. They had three naturalists from the Web of Life Field School, and then they spent the entire day outdoor. It was in their school, but they didn't do it inside their classroom. I think they were all outdoors, and they were talking about trees, and then they basically spent the whole day outside their classrooms. So I'm not sure if it's something that they do in all schools. But yeah, she had fun, and maybe that's something that we can also think about doing.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for all of this incredible input. You know, our next step on our committee is to really start to define our plan and figure out our next steps. So we are soliciting feedback from, you know, different organizations, community members, groups, kind of just talking with people about this, and then obviously trying to think about how to move it forward. So your input is incredibly important, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kim for any other business.
Thank you so much, Nate, for this presentation. It was informative, it was inspiring and encouraging, and thank you for giving us so much opportunity to share our thoughts. I know that you will take the input from the committee and share it back with the Clean Committee, and that it will have an impact on the work that you're doing. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I think what I'll do is turn this back over to Tushar to figure out what our next meeting is going to look like.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Ivy, for going over the kind of environmental initiatives we're working on and what we hope to see in the future. That was a really great discussion. Yeah, so for those of you who are still here, we kind of wanted to see for our next meeting on April 26th, whether you would want to be in person now that COVID has decreased a little bit and we're relaxing the mask mandates from required to strongly recommended, or if we want to continue this kind of setting where we're online. So that being said, does anyone have a motion on whether they want to be in person or online? And then we can take, once we have a second, we can take a vote. Yeah, Lisa?
I motion to in person.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second for that motion to go in person? Yeah, Megan?
I second the motion for our April meeting to be in person.
All right, thank you so much. Now that we have a motion and a second, we can go ahead and vote. So if you would like it to be in person, then you can type yes in the chat. And if you want it to be online, then you can type no. And you can also abstain. All right. Does everyone have their votes in? Right now, it's looking like it's a majority for in person. If we have yes, meaning in person. All right. Based on that, I think we can safely say that our next meeting in April will be in person. And if need be, if cases go up or something, then we can always send out a Google form or something in the future if we feel there's a need to vote again. But right now, it looks like we're safe to say we'll be in person for April.
Great, thank you very much, Tushar, and I will make sure that everybody has the information that you need about where the meeting is and which door you can come in, and if you happen to be running a few minutes late, what our backup plan will be and which safety protocols are in place. So thank you all very much for attending today. Tushar, any last thoughts before we close up?
No, I think we're good. Just thank you all so much for coming, and see you in April.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Hey, Kim, real quickly, do you want me to just send you I just have like a few bullet points. So do you want to send me the template and I can fill it in and send it back?